Hi there! Welcome back to another video on my channel. Today we are going to be talking about some old discussion topics like I always do. Again, I'm always here with the cold tea, kind of my thing. But today we're going to be talking about media literacy and the lack thereof. So if you're interested in this topic, just keep on watching. Okay, media literacy. Yes, I know this is one of those things where people have been rumbling about this on TikTok and other spheres of the internet for quite some time now, and I am late to the game in giving my opinion, viewpoint, whatever, on this media literacy crisis going on in the world right now. You might be saying, Cassidy, why am I listening to you? Why are you talking about this? I've been wanting to make this video for a while, but I have been putting it off because I didn't really think a whole lot of people would care about what I had to say on this topic. Just in general, I don't know, self-doubt things, I guess. But with my last video covering a similar topic about the rise of anti-intellectualism on TikTok, that kind of took off, and it made me realize that people are thinking about these issues and are really wanting, I guess, a more nuanced way to discuss what people perceive as problems and effective solutions on how to deal with them. So I'm just going to say this is something that I've been interested in for quite some time. And I guess my qualifications for this are one, I make media. Okay, so obviously I'm making YouTube videos. That is in and of itself is a form of media creation, right? I am also an author. I write books for a living. You can go on my website, try to find all my books. But I write books for a living. A lot of stuff that I tend to be interested in or write about and employs horror as a tool of thinking more so about the past, lived experiences, sometimes what it's like to be a femme presenting person or a woman. So I use media, I create art, I create media that's meant to be analyzed in some sort of way. I personally think all media should be analyzed in some sort of way. Hence, we're going to be talking about this video in a minute. So that's my qualification. I make media. I make YouTube videos. I write books. Here I used to paint here and there. I'm trying to get back into that. So I am a creator of the arts. Two, some of the stuff we're going to talk about today really relates well to my master's thesis. So if you don't know, my name's Cassidy. I went to Boston University and I got my master's degree in international relations with a focus on diplomacy. Now, what I focused on was more what I like to call internet diplomacy, of how governments and states interact with each other online, but also with their constituents, or with their own peoples and peoples from other countries. How can you as a government operate on social media as a digital citizen and either, rally people behind a certain cause, condemn your opponents, stuff like that. So a lot of the themes that I'm talking about kind of can relate to propaganda in a way, and that's one aspect of media literacy. So when I was writing my thesis, I was writing it through the perspective of why a government should utilize something like this. And if you look now, in this day and age, with these presidential campaigns, a lot of them are fully utilizing internet memes to try to signal to people that they're with it, right? So yes, I do have a video on this channel that is a couple years old, and it was really when I was really bad about about talking on camera. So it's not the best video, but I did make a video where I was trying to explain my thesis to y'all. I got a suggestion in the comments that people want to see that again, so I might make another video about it as a retrospective years later. But essentially it was okay boomer memes, and what was it called? Hang on, let me pull up my LinkedIn real quick. Oh my god. Okay, yeah, so the full title of the paper is Okay Boomer Memes and Public Diplomacy's Struggle to Stay Connected in the Digital Age. Okay, yes, so that's what that is called. If you want to look it up, it's on my LinkedIn. Anyway, so that's my second qualification, is I literally have a master's thesis in something that's pertains to this. I wasn't a comms major. I studied international relations because I'm very interested on how people communicate cross-culturally. I am in a cross-cultural marriage. So I guess it kind of pertains to why I'm so interested. But even prior to that, okay, so In terms of literacy itself, obviously, I read books, I love books, I write books. But I've also had some experience teaching as well. So when I was in grad school, the entire time throughout my program, I was a teaching assistant for various college level courses at Boston University. I worked mainly within the science department, actually, earth and science department. And my role primarily in the courses that I helped teach was to try to bring a humanities perspectives for kids majoring in sciences. I worked a lot. I had like my first class that I worked on was climate focused. So it was about seeing climate change through a multidisciplinary approach. So there was obviously a science professor on it. He was a biologist, but then they also had a poli-sci professor, a humanities professor, or English professor, giving different perspectives of how climate change can impact us culturally, physically, politically, all sorts of things. So that was my first introduction to that. And then afterwards, I got picked up by another professor in the Earth and Sciences department, and I worked with him for quite a few years. He had courses on sustainable development. So not only developing technologies that would, again, have more renewable energy resources and things like that, but also emphasizing the need for such things and how one can incorporate new technology into a society in a way that like isn't too rapid for folks. I didn't necessarily play devil's advocate, but I really, really tried to instill a sense of perspective for folks to different levels of scientific literacy in general. Okay, so did I teach? Yes, I taught, and did that. I also I volunteered with Big Brothers Big Sisters for a while I was living in Boston, and so I worked with children directly. I also, like, way back when, was like an ESL tutor when I lived in Brazil for a little bit. I was an English major prior to switching over to international studies in college. I was also a Spanish tutor for a while too. I, I've been teaching a little bit. Even in high school. I'd be helping out my friends with their whole gig, and tutored them as well in various things. I was in the IB program. My primary focus was the thing I like to do in particular. I like excelled at IB English, and one of the tests we had to do was directly analyzing poetry, especially from like Sylvia Plath. So yeah, that's my long-winded. Even before that, okay, like my favorite subjects in school were always English and history. I love science a lot, but I don't have the quantitative math skills anymore to be able to fully participate as a scientist. So yeah, that's my background. Hello, it's me. So sorry for that long-winded explanation of that. So that's why I feel like I can talk about media literacy, or this issue that people are really frustrated with. From what I understand, from what I understand, this topic has really popped off, and especially since the 2016 election, and the popularization of fake news, right? It's fascinating and something to study, right? But also there is some pretty severe real world consequences to quote unquote fake news, right? And misinformation as well. It can have dire consequences, not only politically, but it can actually lead people to make poor health decisions, or things that could result in physical harm as well, as we've seen in the recent past. So I just wanted to talk about the importance of media literacy, why this is like a new thing. And actually there's lots of NGOs and other people that are fighting to try to get media literacy taught as a separate thing within schools, even though that is hard to like regulate and standardize, for different reasons we'll talk about. But so this is like an emerging thing as its own niche of study, as opposed to something that, like, when I was growing up, my concept of what is now media literacy could be found in literary analysis, through my English classes, or given perspectives through like history classes and stuff like that. But now it's becoming its own separate thing. So I'm just gonna like give you some bare bones definitions real quick, and then we will get right on into it. Just wanted to point out the definition of literacy has changed slightly since its inception. It used to just mean like the ability to read and write. That's how we define literacy for a very long time. But now that's kind of shifted into just literacy in general being, can you read and write, but also can you like use those skills to be a functioning member of society, right? So there's a difference between like memorizing a word and like fully understanding its meaning. There's also a difference between being able to read and then being able to read and understand like where bus stops are, where the hospital is, things like that. So that's kind of how the definition of literacy has changed over time. I'm just going to read to you like a definition I found online about like media literacy. So media literacy is an expanded conceptualization of literacy that includes the ability to access and analyze media messages as well as create, reflect, and take action using the power of information and communication skills to make a difference in the world. So media literacy is a type of literacy, of functional literacy, but as it pertains to things we consume like movies, books, pictures, TV shows, songs, things like that. So I found a list of like functional ways to use media literacy, and I'm going to kind of like pop them off one at a time right now. Examples of media literacy can include reflecting on one's media's choices, so what you choose to consume in your daily life. Another one is being able to identify sponsored content, so recognizing advertisements. I think this is really particular online, especially TikTok and stuff, because it feels like so many people, not even just like influencers anymore, but like so many people are like actively trying to sell you products, especially through TikTok and stuff. And not everybody discloses like right away that they're ads, right? Because there's new laws being put into place that you have to distinguish that like if something's a sponsorship ad, like with hashtags in the caption, or like saying it in the caption, saying it on screen, and or at least like saying it as well. And not every influencer follows those rules. So yeah, it's important to be able to understand context and being able to spot out if something is like sponsored, if something is paid for, if something is being sold to you, right? Another measurement, the third one, is recognizing stereotypes. 4, analyzing propaganda, which is kind of like what I touched about my thesis. 5, discussing the benefits, risk, and harming of media use. There's also a generalized statement that says like, how can you develop these critically thinking, like how do you develop critical analysis in these tools? They can be developed through practices like constructive media decoding and lateral reading, which entails looking at multiple perspectives and assessing the quality of a particular piece of media. I feel like this one's really important, and I will really get into that. Okay, so I'm just going to go through each one of the brackets that we talked about. Okay, so 1, reflecting on one's media choices. Now, I think this is this pertains more to, I think, personal safety issues. This could easily be thought of, you know, the internet is the internet, right? And there are bad actors in day-to-day life that also translate to the internet in some shape and way. These people purposely put out content that is meant to just invoke feelings of being unsafe. So this can involve creating content that's like geared towards that the goal is to have children view it, but then contain things that are completely inappropriate for children, or things that can guide children towards certain websites or give them access to certain people who might have malintent with them. So, or to put them on like predator websites. I don't know if this is still popular because again, I don't have children, so I don't know. But for a while there was this thing going around on YouTube where certain people would make videos of like characters like Spider-Man and Elsa, and make videos animating them and then putting them in very inappropriate positions with one another, and having inappropriate dialogue and stuff like that, and trying to normalize these behaviors for children. So that's like the thing that pops up in my mind for like a harmful media choice. And again, through the eyes and mind of a child, like they're just going to see Elsa and be like, "Whoa, Elsa," right? There's not going to be anything that's going to really set off red flags. And so again, in my opinion, it's really important for the parents to be involved in that sort of discussion, or to kind of filter what children see, maybe talk to them about like in age appropriate ways, how everything that they see online isn't necessarily appropriate for them. I'm towing a line here because I feel like a lot of people use this argument to try to regulate content that they deem inappropriate personally, as opposed to things that could be potentially harmful for children. So when I say that, I think of again, personally, people who engage in like the whole book banning thing and who want to ban books just based off of like content, like queer content, or maybe like children's books that share stories from diverse backgrounds and perspectives, because they personally don't jive with it, as opposed to it actually endangering the safety of a child, right? So a lot of what I discuss here, I'm going to tread lightly about, because I think while I am a huge advocate for analysis and everything you consume, I do think that some people use the buzzword of analysis to promote or perpetuate certain belief systems, right? And that's kind of what I'm alluding to here, in this case, because there are things that that if you consume that, you can really put your life at risk. Also, like in terms of media choices, that could easily be said about like cyberbullying too. So like not only how one consumes media, but like how one actively creates that as well. Um, like, are you typing out these nasty, mean ass messages to random people online and potentially causing harm in some sort of way, right? Like trying to encourage people to be good actors or good digital citizens, on how one chooses to interact with folks online too. That could also kind of be filtered into media choices as well. So not only like what are you consuming, but how are you actively engaging with it, or how are you actively engaging with other people online. Okay, so the second one, identifying sponsored content. So this kind of goes to what I was talking about before, and I use like beauty makeup people or TikTok people as an example. Like I cannot scroll through TikTok without somebody trying to sell me exercise equipment or a face mask or something like that. But this kind of can translate to things like outside of just products themselves, right? So again, I'm going to be careful. And some of these kind of interact with like the other categories, and they kind of do the interweaving. But sponsored content isn't just from corporations, right? But it can also be from like political groups, right? It can be sponsored through NGOs too. Anybody with money who wants to promote something, you can pay somebody to say it, and they'll probably do it, right? There is again, I'm only going based off of my personal TikTok, but I know like there's like influencers like Bryce Hall, who are now being very vocal about their political opinions, who have never expressed these sorts of opinions or any political opinions really in the past before. I know how do you say her last name? Tana Mojo, that person, very problematic person. But anyway, she on her podcast mentioned that she received an offer from certain political parties, like a lot of money to endorse certain candidates or do whatever. So that is a thing now too, right? You see a lot of celebrities endorsing political candidates. That's not like uncommon, right? But I think it's just everyone's like, why are these celebrities giving their opinions on XYZ? Probably because they're paid to do it. If they're not, you know, that's fine. Everyone's allowed to express an opinion. But again, just me personally, like I don't think it's a healthy thing for somebody to just be like, oh, I'm going to vote this way now, just because Taylor Swift told them to, or their favorite celebrity told them to, it's like, I think everyone has the right to be politically active. I know there's certain celebrities like Mark Ruffalo has been very politically active for a long time now. Or like politically vocal for a while. Mark Hamill is. I only know this because again, my husband's a big Star Wars fan, so we see Mark Hamill's posts quite a bit. But everybody has the right to express political opinions. I just would err on the side of caution if you are trying to get your political opinions from like famous people or celebrities or whatever. Again, in an idyllic world, we would all be paying attention to policy and be voting based off of what we believe is personally best for ourselves and others, or for society in general. But not everybody has the time and energy to invest in politics, because people are working 9 to 5s and even longer than 9 to 5s nowadays, like multiple jobs, and you don't have the mental or physical energy for that stuff. I'm not going to pretend that I'm above it just because I'm a little bit tuned into politics, whereas other people aren't. It is a privilege to be tuned into politics in that way. So yeah, I would just say that keep that in mind, as well as that like Sponsored content can be like, yeah, just people being like, I love Coca-Cola, you should drink it too. And it's funny because also, again, I'm speaking about TikTok specifically, but I'm just going to say this in case people don't know. TikTok as a platform is really interesting because um, they can retroactively sponsor posts. So what does that mean? That means like if I posted, I'm licking my microphone. If I posted a video today about like how much I love Cheez-Its and say that I eat Cheez-Its on the regular and I just love it as a consumer, and maybe I generally do, right? I posted that today, and like a month later from now, Cheez-Its sees that video and it's like, hey, we want to use that as an ad. We really like that video. And I'd be like, okay, sweet. So then they pay me for that ad, and then it gets kind of boosted out again, or I get retroactively paid for that. So now, because that system's in place, there's certain people who are really social media savvy, and they will make videos that still give the vibes and energy of an ad, just for the off chance that it might get picked up by some other corporation, or yeah. Michaela Nagara does this quite a bit as a beauty influencer. If you give a lot of products favorable reviews, maybe one day they'll pay you. And she's also not the best about disclosing ads either. So there is that. But yeah, it's just be smart. I think it's hard for folks, especially folks who maybe did not grow up in this era of the internet. I mean, really, like, I can be included in that. Like, the internet became a mainstream thing when I was young, when I was a child, which is something I write about quite a bit, actually. Like, sorry, I'm going to do a plug. Me disclosing that I'm selling something to you. This is a short story collections of internet stuff and toys and tech from the early 2000s. So I reflect on this quite a bit. The book I'm working on now, that is almost done, that I'm hoping we'll get into the editing phase next month, is about internet culture of the 2010s. And it's the same thing, scary stories, but it's more about me reflecting on how people construct their self-image through, and something called, it's like how people can cultivate their self-image and self-hate culture, basically. And I think the 2010s was the real start of that. It was very flashy. It was very like, I'm flexing on you guys, look how much money I have, look how much social status I have. And that's when people really started associating their self-worth with their own internet presence as well. And then now I would argue people take that instead, not just their self-worth, but then they turn it into their own businesses and careers. And so their livelihood is really, really dependent on their self-image and their reputation and whatever. And some people, not saying you have to have a perfect reputation to be able to make money. Obviously, that's not the case. Like, there's so many influencers out there that just do some sketchy stuff randomly for clicks and views and drama or whatever. But it's becoming like your whole identity is your brand, and it's really weird. And I feel like that's a unique problem for this decade, whereas the previous decade, it was like the formulation of that, right? It's like, I don't have friends if I don't look cool, which again has been a problem for a very long time, but I feel like it's only exacerbated online. And so now we're entering this really commercialized era of the internet, which again, I think that's why people are also talking about media literacy, because everything is so commercialized, and everybody has an ulterior motive for everything nowadays. So sorry, I'm going on a quick rant. But yeah, that's the second point, which is I feel like is super important, is identifying sponsored content. The other one we talked about is like recognizing stereotypes. So this is also super important, and I feel like this could be a retrospective issue, or this could just be a thing altogether. So we would like to progress socially as a society, right? Like, we can all agree on that. Great. Okay. So we also have to recognize that there are people who don't get much exposure to people who are outside their own demographic or group, right? I am a white woman from the Midwest. I grew up in a Catholic environment. There was opportunities for me that I was exposed to other people because I lived in a somewhat urban environment. Like, it was a dying industrial town, right? And again, I didn't come from the best like socioeconomic background, so I did get to intermix with people who had different lived experiences than me, but that's not the case for everybody. And a lot of times, even today, unless you purposely try to seek that out or try to learn from others, you can live your whole life without fully understanding the nuances of people's identities, right? There is media even being made today that doesn't do the best job of portraying uh, certain people's in certain lights. Sometimes this is done maliciously. Sometimes this is just done because people are not getting sensitivity reads or views or whatever, and they end up putting something out that could perpetuate a harmful stereotype, right? I literally experienced this the other day because I was being nostalgic and I was being nostalgic and I was thinking about the Alvin and the Chipmunks movie where they travel around the world and like try to collect those dolls with the diamonds in them. Do you guys remember that? I saw a picture of Jeanette, the chipmunk with the brown hair and the glasses, and I was like, hey, that looks like me, hee hee. So then I was like Googling that movie, right? And I was so nostalgic. I was like, oh man, I used to love this movie, blah, 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 blah. Like, oh, I kind of want to watch it again. And so I was reading articles about it, and then I never realized, because again, that movie was made in the late 80s. I think I was born in 95, so I probably watched it in the late 90s. And I was reading reviews of it, and then there was people talking about like really negative racial stereotyping of like Muslim and Arab people in that movie, and then like there's a whole scene with like African cannibals or something in it. And I don't remember. I personally do not remember that at all. Like memories wise, I just remember hot air balloons and songs. But then I saw the drawings and I was like, oh, yep, I could see how that could be interpreted that way, right? So, yeesh. So that is part of like recognizing stereotypes, right? Like, or perpetuating harmful stereotypes in the future. This could be done like for a number of different demographics, like women, queer people, people of color, how people from certain countries, people with certain disabilities, whatever. But it's important to be able to see those sorts of things, like these inherent biases, and be like, oops, there's that. That could potentially cause me to continue to have negative thoughts or opinions about a certain group of people, right? And again, sometimes this isn't done maliciously. Sometimes it's just people being ignorant. They don't know any better, and they're writing characters that are based off the preconceived stereotypes in their head or what they have experienced, like through their lived experiences. But you know, it's another thing to talk to someone like that in person. I know one of the things that we kind of struggled with. I say we as in like my marriage. I'm married to a beautiful Brazilian man, and there is this kind of stereotype, or at least at the time, when we were dating, that all Brazilians are like beautiful and sexy and very sexually active sorts of people, right? So people would make those sorts of assumptions about my husband quite a bit, and sometimes they were said to his face when he was here in in U.S., and sometimes they came from family members, and we like, you know, we had to pump the brakes on that a little bit. I say we, but it was mostly me. Like I kind of took them aside and be like, you know, guys, like I'm sure you don't mean this with ill intent, but this is how you're coming off right now, right? And again, because we as human beings are continuously engaging with media or putting things out there, like, you know, if I know if I ask them to tell a story with my husband in it, it might like affect how other people view my husband if they include things like some of the jokes they say or some of the things, whatever. It would give people a negative opinion about my husband, right? That isn't necessarily true. So that's just like a contextualization of that problem for you guys. The other marker that we can talk about is analyzing propaganda. This one. Ooh, this one's spicy. Okay. Okay. So I just want to start this off with like, nobody is immune to propaganda. Okay. You are not like, I don't think people should have this air of intellectual superiority just because they see through the bullshit, right? And again, I'm going to toe the line about how I talk about this, because there's layers. Okay. So one of the things that I really was fascinated with at the time of writing my thesis, and even prior to that, was the idea of how people are influenced online, right? Not just like the fabulousness of the influencers, but how governments can utilize that, or political figures, or whoever can utilize that to influence their audience as well. If they tap into the lifeblood of whatever niche group is, and then promote those ideas and like signal that they are part of the cause, part of the group, part of whatever. I think even though I don't agree with his politics whatsoever, when I studied him, Donald Trump and his PR team were almost masterful at this when it came to shackling up with people who belong to a certain demographic online. They really tapped into the meme culture, purposely tapped into the meme culture of certain alt-right groups or certain groups of white men who felt personally disenfranchised by current society, right? Um, and they spoke to them in a language that was already established in their inner circles and signaled to them and continuously tried to incorporate their beliefs into mainstream politics. That infected other people offline, and it promoted this culture of like not just like bigotry, low key, not even low key, but bigotry. But it was also just like written off as like, oh, Donald Trump is saying everything that we're all too afraid to say. So he's going to be the mouthpiece for a group of people who felt like they had to hide for some sort of reason because they might have carried certain beliefs, right? And then that activated people that might not be online, that might not be active digital citizens. Again, digital citizen in this case is just somebody who actively participates online in the internet, because the internet's kind of like its own superseding thing. So like I always think it's fascinating because every Twitter account could be like one person, right? Or every Instagram account is like one person, right? So it kind of levels the playing field in terms of attention between like the Instagram account of Finland, right, versus the Instagram account of somebody like Michaela Nagera or whoever, right? It shifts the power of influence online, right? And you have states that are scrambling to do this. So anyway, circling back, Donald Trump really, really utilized his presence as a digital citizen to push forward political ideas by trying to cement himself as an in-group person and then projecting that outward IRL, right? And then it rallied people who might not necessarily be online like that to be in this cause because he's speaking a similar language that these people want to speak, right? He is saying everything that they're thinking, but they're too afraid to say out loud. He is not PC. He is validating these feelings that have been previously been shameful, right? In public society, right? So there's that. And by doing that, he generated, or his team generated, quite a bit of memes that painted him in a positive light within these people by utilizing not just like a sense of humor that is very particular to these groups of people, but they always elevated him in a status that was above his enemies. Like, I don't know if you've seen it, but I've seen plenty of Trump Jesus memes, especially on Facebook. And I've seen things online through searching for thesis, but also through just, engaging with folks from different backgrounds that supported or shared these either ironically or unironically, right? So yeah, there's that. His team was, again, utilized that to the point where he was able to basically meme himself into presidency. And then and then things got dangerous. But anyway, so can you analyze those pictures and be like, yes, this image of Trump and Jesus is trying to virtue signal to these groups that Trump is on equal footing to their Lord and Savior, right? That's what the image is trying to do. That's the feelings that it's trying to invoke. And then people are sharing this one another and creating this in-group sense of a shared belief, right? It's kind of like studying paintings or studying art, but like seeing art happen so rapidly online is interesting. So like, it's kind of like studying art, how art would be used to like invoke certain feelings, right? Like, or make these political statements or reflect around problems in society at that time. But it's just those things still exist inherently when people like make memes or goofy ass shit on the internet. But because things are being shared and spread so rapidly, it feels like people aren't allowing themselves enough time to flex that muscle memory of like how one would used to view paintings and art and like pause and really think about it. And then they just kind of share it to show that like either they're in the group or that this is something that mirrors their values, or, they just want to hee. Right. A lot of stuff. Okay. Anyway, I'm like talking in circles again. So yes. So my point of like saying that like I shouldn't feel intellectually superior because I can see that and maybe other people aren't. Maybe they do see it and they just don't give a damn. But what's really interesting about the 2016 election in particular is that we have documented evidence that shows that foreign bodies were trying to influence US elections on both sides. So the reason I say no one's immune from propaganda is because I myself found myself following an Instagram account at that time that was a very pro-black African American Instagram account and would share news that pertain to the black community, right? Whether that be news relating to entertainment or politics or, at that time, um, you know, Black Lives Matter was very popular because there was a persistent issue of, young black people or black people in general being suffering harsher physical punishments for things like that, right? Black people were getting killed left and right. There's still issues of racial biases within the justice system. So that was really popping off at the time. So I followed this page because they would share a lot of content like that. Well, come to find out, while again I was writing my thesis, I was looking up accounts or popular accounts that were also based out of different countries that were misleading. And it turns out that Instagram account that I was following was also owned by a Russian folks, and they were using that as a way to cause further divide within the US political culture, right? Or just social culture as well. They wanted to incite feelings of panic and fear, and even though these instances were correct that this stuff was actually happening, the way they positioned the images, the source of images that were shared, the language used in captions, all of that really encouraged people to share, right, to spread this information, to do that. But also it incited feelings of like alienations for people who belong to that sort of community, right? Like nobody's out here to protect us, nobody cares about us, politicians don't care about us. And again, there's still some truth in that, but it was really exacerbated and meant to be more shareable, right? That's the kind of language that was used. So again, when I realized that, I unfollowed that account specifically, right? And I think again people should be leery about how they get their news. But yeah, so that was an instance of myself falling for propaganda, and I'm saying nobody's immune to that kind of thing because it exists in different ways in different ends of the political spectrum. And even so, I kind of wanted to talk about this, but I want to give like a little asterisk of warning because there's plenty of traditional media sources and news sources that are also putting out a certain political agenda. I think it's no secret that Fox News leans very, very right leaning, and there's other news stations that are very, very left leaning, and there's some that are meet in the middle. But even besides that, besides these sort of political biases that they have, there's certain news stations that are owned by certain rich folks who own certain companies and who want to put out stories or maybe suppress stories that might paint them in a positive or negative light. That is a true fact of the matter, and we should be aware of these biases depending on what news network we're getting information from, right? I have the asterisk next to that because I believe that there's some people who hear that and they're like, oh, we can't trust mainstream media at all, blah 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 blah. And while I'm like, yes, because they have failed to report on certain environmental issues going on, they fail to report on like damages done because of these sorts of issues or other stories or certain product recalls. There's plenty of instances where the media chooses not to cover certain stories and favors other stories instead, right? Or there's plenty of instances where newscasters are giving more opinion-based information than they are just stating matter of fact what had happened in a certain news story, right, that day. There's people who take that and kind of run with it and then like get into like conspiracy theory territory, which again, like I'm not okay, but you also have to be just as critical of the conspiracy theory type information as you are of what's conceived as mainstream media and they're hiding the truth from you and all that kind of stuff. Okay, let's apply the same critical thinking to the conspiracy theory stuff because I feel like people make that leap and then the critical thinking turns off and then it allows them to just reinforce certain distrust, like beliefs they had of like they don't just they distrust traditional systems, and rightly so. Like, these systems are flawed and need to be worked on, but instead of trying to make that better, they hop onto a conspiracy theory and latch onto it, and like some of those conspiracy theories can be rooted in problematic shit. And again, I feel like that critical thinking skill should be applied to the conspiracy theories as well. And I don't see that done enough within these communities. So like, that's my like plea, being like, please, 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 like, let's keep using that brain. Let's continue to be critical. Okay, great. So yes, okay. Okay, so the last one, also the last bracket we talked about was the benefits, risks, and harms of media use. Right. Okay. So again, we kind of have a personal responsibility as people in general interacting with society, right? That those rulings should be applied to the internet as well, right? As much as we'd like to say that we have personal freedoms and we live in we can do whatever we want, and blah blah blah. At the end of the day, there's something called a social contract where, if you don't do any harm to me, I'm not going to do any harm to you, vice versa. Like, my freedoms only extend so far to when I encroach on somebody else's territory, right? Like, sure, I have a personal freedom to be like, I like your house. That's great. And I want to live there now. So I'm going to break into your house and kick you out. No, I can't do that because that's a crime. That's infringing on your personal freedoms. And so, right. So we all have limited reach about, our social contracts and how we're supposed to treat one another as a basis, like, right, like, we have a personal responsibility not to cause harm in order to maintain a functioning society. That same thing should be applied to the internet, in my opinion, and I think people are starting to realize that the things that they put out or do whatever can cause personal harm. Okay, so this can be particularly important when we're talking about putting out misinformation and things like that. Something I want to talk about, and again, I don't mean to ruffle feathers, but I've seen this play out in my own family, so this is very important to me. Especially when COVID was happening, the amount of COVID misinformation out there was absolutely bonkers. And you had certain influencers or popular people online not only denouncing COVID and being like, it's not that big a deal, but you also had them recommending random ass treatments instead of actually getting the vaccine or doing whatever. People were taking random ass treatments or trying to have these like secret miracle cures for COVID, which ended up putting them in more harm than anything else. Okay. I know people in my personal life that have listened to this health advice and have suffered because of it. And that's the part where I want to talk about personal responsibility. Again, there's people who distrust traditional medicine. There's people who don't like big pharma. Right. The healthcare system in the US and other places is flawed. People are jacking up medicine prices like crazy to take advantage of sick folks, right? There's plenty of reasons not to trust that. But again, the alternative to that is not some woo-woo bullshit that could potentially get people hurt. People should not be chugging essential oils instead of getting the medicine they need. People should not be just drinking bleach instead of getting the COVID vaccine. Because I know there's people who really don't support the vaccinations, and I have people in my family that just refuse to get vaccinated. More people in my family did not get vaccinated than people who did. And two of those people almost died. I'm not even exaggerating. One had to be like, go to the hospital 3 towns away because they were on their deathbed. And I think that there is a certain degree of responsibility people should have when they're putting out this kind of shit and people are getting physically hurt because of this information. Now, one could say, why are you getting health advice from a rando on the internet? I would love to get an answer from folks about why are we listening to randos on the internet instead of people who are doctors or whatever. But then people talk about how, like, oh, you can't trust doctors because they're part of the system. It's kind of circling back to the anti-intellectualism video I was talking about. In that video, we were talking about book talk specifically, and they were talking about how people don't want to read anything that doesn't really have smut in it, or people aren't looking to engage with books the same way they did before. People aren't looking to really do a deep dive into a book and try to discover all of its meanings. They're just reading for enjoyment. And and what else? Oh, the trophifications of books, like how books are being marketed as only like, oh, this is a strong female character, and instead of giving all the themes and nuance in the book, whatever. The reason I say that the word anti-intellectualism didn't really fit there for me personally is because anti-intellectualism for me, it more so deals with people that are distrustful of doctors and distrustful of people who are educated because they are still part of the system, and therefore there's real life consequences of people dying or getting hurt because they refuse to see a doctor. Now, granted, not all doctors are the best. They're not, I've had great doctors, I've had some not great doctors in my life, but as a whole, I'm not going to pretend to know more about bones or the body than somebody who went to school for like 8 years to do that, right? I would instead maybe get multiple opinions from different doctors before making a decision. That's fine. But to completely distrust doctors who are telling you like, hey, this is a way to prevent this disease, and then instead drinking bleach because Joe Rogan told me to, is a whole different story. And I know I'm really I'm really emphasizing my words and I'm really getting upset, but people don't understand the weight of their words. Words are powerful. Words mean something. And this is, again, the use of, like, am I creating things that contributes to the collective good of society? Right. Or am I causing people direct harm? And I don't know how the people who do this sleep at night, because people are dying from medical misinformation. This is crazy. And, it's not just about differences of opinion anymore. These are people who are actively killing folks. And I think there should be some sort of responsibility for that. It's not people getting their feelings hurt. It's people dying. Anyway, sorry. That was my own personal rant. Anti-intellectualism is a thing. And again, it's not saying, because I had this comment on the last video and they're like, oh, but you don't need to go to school to be an intellectual. Nobody said that. That is not what this is about. Nobody said that. There's plenty of people who didn't go to school or didn't have formal schooling that are still intelligent. I had a relative, this was my great-grandfather, who didn't get an education past, third grade or something? But then, he ended up building homes and he was an architect and he could figure out calculus just fine. That is a brilliant man. He was able to do that in spite of the challenges that were there at this time, all those years ago, right? But that can't be said about everybody. Right? That can't be said about us collectively as a whole. And again, the value of an education is so important. And the being able to critically dissect media or critically dissect anything that you are exposed to and understand that, like, maybe people have an agenda when they're telling me this sort of information. Maybe they're just being sponsored because they keep paying. The more outlandish shit they say, the more money they make. So they're going to keep pushing out this outlandish bullshit about how school shootings aren't real, or these victims weren't victims, but they were actors, or how I'm sorry, I'm going off about one specific person, but this drives me absolutely bonkers. It's not a difference of opinion if it's causing active harm to folks. It's not a difference of opinion if people are actively dying. And I'm sorry, I keep going on this rant, but there is a difference between, oh, I think that XYZ is a problem, and I think but I think ABC is a problem. You can't do the same thing when it comes to people's lives, their actual lives. And people keep making political choices that aren't based in factual information, but are based in either what they've been told to believe for a long time, or what makes sense to them within this rigid in-group that they're part of, as opposed to what is best for people as a whole. And that shit drives me crazy. So anyway, sorry, rant over. Sorry to put you through that, but again, this is the kind of thing that I think really emphasizes the problem that is in this country. Not even in this country, but as a whole, but primarily in this country, because this is where I live and I saw it firsthand and I lived it and experienced it and I studied it through an academic lens. But now I'm telling you that this has real world implications and we need to do something about it. Okay, great. So what are we going to do about it? Great. So for an individual level, there are things we could do to enhance our critical analysis. Now, I should have said this in the beginning and I didn't, but I'm going to say it now. Literacy isn't just like a stagnant thing. There are ways to improve your literacy in general, or and there's things that like would cause you to have a lack of literacy in general. So it's like a muscle, like anything else, like language skills, right? I speak Portuguese sometimes with my husband's family, and if I don't do it for a long time, then my Portuguese is rusty. If I do it frequently, then I can pick up and I'm pretty good at it, right? But again, that is something that waxes and wanes depending on how much I'm exposed to it. Same thing with literacy as a whole, but also media literacy, right? How often are you practicing this can relate to how quick you are at picking up the bullshit. Okay, great. So how can we improve our critical analysis skills as a whole? Okay, you can do practices like constructivist media decoding. Okay, so this is literally just kind of like what I've been talking about. It's like decoding. So what is it? Am I watching a movie? Great. Do I know anything about the director, the people who wrote the movie, or whoever made it? Okay. What message are they trying to tell me? What is the goal of this piece of media? Am I watching something scary to get spooked? Am I watching something that's supposed to make me laugh? Am I watching something that's supposed to make me think? What am I doing? Okay. If I'm watching something spooky, how are they invoking that fear? What tools are they using to invoke that fear? And what does that say about what we are afraid of as a society? Okay. Are they showing me different monsters? Okay, well, what those monsters look like? Why did they choose those features to depict something that is grotesque, right? Like, you know, like if a monster has a large nose, is that trickling back to instances of anti-Semitism that was very popular in creating monsters like goblins or whatever back in the day? Are they referencing that? Are they trying to do a counterculture thing where they're doing something like Get Out, where it shows that like this is a racialized, like horror movies consistently have used stereotypes of certain groups of people and incorporated it into monsters or whatever? Are they flipping that on its head? Are they showing that the realities of marginalized people of color, and how they feel in predominantly white spaces through movies like Get Out? What are they doing? What are we talking about here? Is it just a spook like and that's it, or is there more happening here? Like that's what decoding media basically is. Within that, it's important to remember that people can have different perspectives. And it's important to get multiple perspectives because the way I see something might not be the way you see something, and vice versa. I've been watching the Alien franchise with my husband recently, and I've been really getting into it. And one of the things I keep pointing out to him is that it's this idea of creating life, right? But there's so many, like even the alien's head is like phallic, and I'm like, there's so many instances that relate to the anxiety that these people have about pregnancy and birth and the horrors of that, but also that being inflicted to people that aren't just women or people with like uteruses, right? That's being inflicted to the men as well. That's being inflicted everywhere. And so Douglas doesn't necessarily see that because he doesn't think that way, but that's what I'm picking up. And I think, and from things that I've read in reviews, I've seen other people pick up on that too. So again, getting varied perspectives on things is great. It's important to kind of look at the who, what, when, where, why. The who, I'm getting flashbacks because every assignment I had as a child, we had to do who, what, when, where, why when it came to history and English and stuff like that. Who is writing this piece? Why are they choosing to do it? What are they talking about? When is it set? What's the historical context of what's ever going on, right? Like, are we living through a depression era? Are we living through the hippy dippy era? Are we living through a time and place that's critical of this certain problem society, right? What did I say? Who, what, when, where, right? Oh, where it is. What country is it in? What town is it in? Is it a small town? Is it a city? Is this set in Afghanistan? Is it set in the North Pole? What are we doing here? Why is the location important? What's the location saying? Right. So actively doing that as a practice, as a skill, can also help develop your critical thinking. I think the who, what, when, where, why is a great way to do that if you want to get started. There's also other educational modes pertinent to media literacy as a whole that you could do. But if you want to do something just for literary analysis like that, great start. Super easy. Who, what, when, where, why. Come up with your own interpretations. Have your friends or have other people do that exercise with you, and then compare notes. Great. Okay. Oh, and lateral reading. Okay, so this is really important, and I didn't touch on this yet, and this video is going to be so damn long. But yeah, lateral reading. So instead of reading one article, like we read top down, right? When we normally read something, when we read a page on a book, when we read an article, when we read a sign, it's top down, right? We need to expand our mindset to lateral reading. So instead of just focusing on the up and down, we need to focus this way. So how many articles are you reading on that subject? Where are these articles coming from? Who wrote them? Are they peer reviewed? Are they vetted in some sort of way? What publication's putting them out? What website are they coming from? XYZ. Is this a credible website? Is this more of a haha hee hee type website like BuzzFeed, or is this some sort of like journal, right? There's differing degrees. And again, with the anti-intellectualism, yes, you can read an article from whatever website you want. And yes, every single article can have biases, even academic journals. The thing I value about academic journals, though, is that articles are peer reviewed. What does that mean? That means multiple eyes have been on this article, multiple people have seen it and approved of it, or multiple people have seen it, read it, and written their own critiques on it. It is not just somebody like me who can blog and say whatever they want and put it online, right? These people are vetted. I like my blog. I think I write helpful articles. I think I have helpful advice, but nobody is vetting what I say. So you should know that. Whereas in other instances, there are articles where people are vetting what people say. So those might have a little bit of heavier weight than other articles from random websites. You're welcome. Anyway, even if you don't trust institutions, at least it has multiple eyes on it, right? And it's not just someone spewing something out of their butt. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting sassier as this video is going on. So you're going to see sassy me for a while. And that's how it's going to be. But yeah, lateral reading is very important. Are we fact checking here? Are we going to different NGOs to do the fact checking? Because there are NGOs out there that have fact checking websites that you can utilize. So yeah, are we vetting things before we share? Are we vetting things before we post? Are we vetting things before we talk about them with our community or with whatever, because that helps with the spread of misinformation. And of course, no one's immune from it. Everybody does it. I've done it. Right. But again, it's more about like moving forward in the social responsibility we have online. Okay, great. Yay. Yeah. And again, that is done also to get differing perspectives on an instance of media or whatever is going on, or a certain news story. Okay, so I just wanted to end this off by just like letting you guys know that there are people who are really invested in this and who are creating educational programs, especially for children and teenagers and youth, to start thinking more critically and to engage more in media analysis. Some places have specialized media literacy classes or news literacy classes now, especially in high schools. Again, it's hard because, like, at least here in the US, things aren't really centralized. So it's kind of up to the school or the state about what they want to teach. And again, like, even though we might have a thing of what we think is best, ultimately certain communities don't agree with that and they are going to do what they want to do. It's kind of like something I wanted to mention about the book video I posted, with some people being really upset that, like, all they do is read smut. At the end of the day, you can't really control what people read. That's like their private thing. Like, we can't always control what people do. So because we can't always control what people do, there's some schools that might not adopt these sorts of policies, and then this problem might continue to incur. Okay, great. But there are schools in this country that are trying to build up media literacy programs. And I think I read that Illinois is technically the only state that requires some sort of media literacy program to be taught in school. So, go Illinois. So yeah, that's kind of like the current state. It's more of like these things are starting to be solidified and talked about within schools and things like that. I saw a ranking on this page that said, in terms of media literacy efforts, Finland ranks number 1, Canada's at number 7, and the US is at number 18. So is there room for improvement here? Yeah. Again, it's just kind of hard because nothing's really standardized, and like you also need the support of government to get behind like a program like this. And when I was using my thesis, or when I was defending my thesis, one of the professors asked me, like, okay, well, why would anybody care about this? Like, why would the governments themselves care about this, or care about their moral responsibility to engaging with digital citizens? Because, like, at the end of the day, when has our government really cared about their moral responsibility to their citizens? And then, I just outlined the problems before, where I was talking about, like, look, like, anybody's susceptible to this. Like, people share misinformation all the time. I've seen things online that from loved ones that I never thought would come out of their mouths, and I saw it online, and there's a digital paper trail. but they're also engaging in things that could potentially cause them physical harm. So I don't know. So yeah, why would they care? Right would they care? So I don't know. I think the best thing we could do is just like watch over our own personal responsibility when it comes to what we promote, engage, and consume online, or what we create. Um, again, people are going to interpret what we do however sort of way, but at the end of the day, like, you just have to do your best and try to help other people do their best as well. Um, it's not about like which ideology is right at the end of the day. It's more so is like, is what I'm saying or doing actively causing harm? And that can just not only be like the opinions that you put out there, but also like how you talk to somebody online too. I think, um, I lived through the age where there was this big, like all these anti-bullying campaigns online. I remember seeing them in like commercials and stuff as a kid too, about cyberbullying and like kids killing themselves because of cyberbullying and stuff like that. And people, that was when people first started getting tried as perpetrators of like assisted suicide or whatever, because they were telling these kids to go kill themselves, and then like they did, and so like other kids were getting tried for that. Like, what you say and do matters in every instance, but especially when what you say and do has the potential to reach thousands and thousands of people. And you might be like me, and like you might be like, dude, I don't have that many followers. Like, I don't have that many friends on Facebook. I don't have that many followers on Instagram. I don't have any subscribers at all, right? But if you look at the metrics behind your screen, or behind your screen, if you look at the metrics like on certain behind the scenes for YouTube or whatever, like, even with my channel size, there's at least a couple hundred people who see my videos every day. There are, like, even on threads, I've written some threads that have gotten thousands and thousands and thousands of views. So people have seen it. Um, and so I do think it's easy to feel like you're in this little bubble online on the internet or within your own little space. But the reality of the situation is a lot different, right? And we all have this responsibility to one another to try to, again, like, take care of each other and take care of ourselves. And I don't know, just don't do this. I don't know, like, don't be icky. I don't know, but yeah, I think media literacy is a huge issue in this country. Again, I'm really optimistic that this problem will get better. I think the problem is that people were using social media. People have been using internet in ways that was never intended to. Like, the internet, when it was initially made, it was like for scientists to share their findings with one another in an easier way, right? That's the kind of communication it was intended for. And then it turned into this thing that was kind of like the Wild West, and people were making their own websites and doing really creative stuff, but also kind of doing some gnarly stuff. But at the end of the day, it was kind of like an unregulated space. And now it's becoming this thing with different social media websites where it's just corporate conglomerates everywhere, and people doing things for an attention economy that can be really great and really good, but it could also be really bad. And I think people are so desensitized to this shit. I really do, because sometimes when I'll talk about this with folks, they'll just be like, oh, well, it's just trolling, or it's just whatever, or it's just like I know people who get online and bully kids while they're playing games that are like in their 30s, and I'm like, bro, what the fuck are you doing? Maybe I'm too sensitive, I don't know, but I just feel like everyone is just so numb. I feel like everybody's so numb because this constant influx of news that might be real and might not be, and all this constant influx of horrible, tragic events that people don't know how to feel anymore, and they just let these things happen. They let these corporations just take over, hijack the internet, and sell us all this useless crap, and then we all become fucking salesmen for all these corporations, and everyone's mentally ill, and we're all just kind of spiraling. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like it because we're all so numb and static on the inside, and I want things to get better. So that's kind of like why I'm making this video too. I didn't realize how many people felt the way I did. I didn't realize how many people were yearning for some sense of normalcy in a world like this, and just decency, like human decency. Christ, you know. So I am hopeful because of that. I'm hopeful because with what I saw on my last video that people actually care about this kind of stuff. And because I care. And sometimes it feels like I'm by myself. But this is the good part of the internet where you can find other people who care about the same sorts of things you do, right? And the people that can validate your feelings and who also want to do good and see good changes in the world. So I just want to say thank you for that. Thank you so much for letting me know that, right, in my last video. And thank you so much for giving me the you know, the cojones to make this video as well. And if you watch this all towards the end, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and attention. I know you could be doing literally anything else, but thank you for being here. It means a lot to me. So if you want me to keep making videos like this, um, just let me know down below. You can leave a like, you can leave a comment, you can share with a friend, or you can subscribe to the channel. Either way, just thank you so much, and until next time, thanks. Bye.